And it brings me great pleasure to bring to our listeners today a really great interview with an incredible woman whose story I think is going to inspire you a great deal and certainly eliminate your own excuses about things that you may have been putting off or being afraid to pursue. And that incredible woman is Jo Elizabeth Pinto. Jo, it's my pleasure to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And if you hear the chirping in the background, Jo, you want to tell us who that is?
That is my daughter's parakeet, Rocket.
Yes, during the coronavirus shutdowns, we're having to do our interviews by Zoom. So if you hear a little bit of background noise, either one of my dogs mad at a UPS guy or I guess Rocket demanding some breakfast, I think that's something we just have to deal with that. So bear with us this time, listeners. So Jo, it is a wonderful treat to have you on. For those of you who don't know her, although her family is very well known, and we'll talk a little bit about that, Jo is a published author of 2 books. You are a Braille proofreader and editor. I saw that you have 2 degrees, one in human rehab services and another in nonprofit organizational management. Mom, you have fur babies, you have feather babies, you are prominent around town. Where I first got to know her was in some eloquent and incredible speeches she gave during some of the political climate in last year's city. It's obvious if you listen to Jo, she loves Brighton with all her heart. She wants Brighton to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jo, you want Brighton to be better than we imagine even possible now. But in spite of all of this activism, for those of you who don't know, Jo is legally blind and has been since birth. So Jo, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us your story, hon.
I grew up in Brighton. I was born in Chicago. My parents had briefly moved there because my dad got a job that took him there, but they didn't like it. They wanted to be here with their families. Both of them grew up here.
Oh, and then moved away? Okay.
And then moved away. And they were drawn back. And I briefly moved away to go to college and came back. So there's something about Brighton.
Yep. And you were born, not really born blind, but close enough, correct? Tell us that story.
Close enough. I was born premature. And I weighed about as much as an apple.
Oh, my.
And
how many weeks premature were you? Was it significant?
Significant, about 3 months premature.
Oh, wow.
And so I wasn't supposed to make it, and they all told my parents I wouldn't live past the moment of birth, and then an hour, and then 2 hours, and then 4 hours, and then overnight, and here I am.
Stubborn as always.
Stubborn as always.
And they said you wouldn't live, but you've lived and lived brilliantly. So congrats to that. So it shows you what doctors do and don't know sometimes.
Right. Sometimes I think they make their predictions a little too much in stone.
So you, go ahead.
I was put in an incubator, and at the time, they didn't know that the oxygen in the incubator would damage the optic nerves that send messages from the eyes to the brain. And nowadays, they take precautions to protect the baby's eyes. But at the time, they weren't aware of those things.
And you were born in 1971, not to give your age away. But that makes you a young lady because you're my age.
Right, we don't do old, so...
No, we don't, no. It's like the 10th anniversary of something, right? It's no longer, So tell us, you grew up, and this is a really interesting story that I've already heard, but I want the listeners to hear it. You were one of the first, back when we were kids going into elementary school, they really segregated out the kids that were not considered quote-unquote normal kids, whether that means you were on the gifted scale or you were a lower IQ or just any kind of disability. And they reintegrated the schools at about the time we were kids. Jo, tell us your story about that. It's amazing.
Well, there's a law called IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it passed the year before I went to public school. So I was among the kids with disabilities who integrated the public schools. And it wasn't necessarily a hostile thing. You think of integrating the public schools and you think of Little Rock Nine and all that. It wasn't like that. It was more that no one knew what to do with us.
Right.
So we were often set aside or put apart for what was considered our own safety. And so it was a lonely experience at times, I remember a lot of putting three desks around me in sort of a C shape and sitting inside that shelter, or not being taught to raise my hand. I didn't know until I got to high school that you raise your hand to call attention, to get an answer, give an answer. Just little things like that.
Oh my goodness.
That was an interesting story because I whispered an answer trying to get some other student to give it because I wanted to move on. And some girl next to me, who became my best friend, whispered, "Raise your hand." And I didn't know really what she meant. I mean, do you wave your hand or do you? Well, that could be taken a lot of ways. So she just stuck my hand up in the air. and, and I thought, what is this girl doing? And we ended up we're still friends today.
That's an incredible story. I didn't even, I can't imagine as I'm sitting here thinking about a young girl in school who wants to contribute, you want to participate, not even able to see that other children were raising their hands because that would be the respectful thing. You wouldn't shout out, in a classroom, not knowing that, and then therefore you weren't able to contribute.
Like, I don't think anybody thought.
Yeah, no, it just wouldn't have crossed anybody's mind. You're right.
It wasn't leave her out. It was just, oh.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's a story. Now your parents, you've told me before, were not coddlers like the school district might have tried to do out of well intentions, but they were being overprotective. Tell us, your folks were very different about your disability. Tell us that.
Oh, my parents were almost, not to be critical, but they were almost more too much the other way. They wanted me in the middle of everything all the time, and I love that about them. The town might have thought I think they got criticism because they were too much the other way, or the town might have thought they were too much the other way. They had me climbing trees and walking to school by myself when I was very young, maybe 5th grade, 4th grade, I don't remember exactly, but doing zip lines into Ehlers Lake and going on campouts. And I think that's part of why I am who I am today, because I did pretty much everything that other kids did. Now, I had a tandem bike so that I didn't get killed. And they said no to roller skates on the sidewalk and pogo sticks and a few other things that Walkmans. I got my Walkman taken away for walking out behind my mom's car.
Oh, yeah.
So, there were a few things, but for the most part, anything that other kids did was fair game.
Well, it sounds like your parents definitely were living up to and giving you the things that they also value, because your family moved back to Brighton when you were very young, but your parents were not typical parents, typical family in the community that just went to work and came home, and they got very, very involved, and to the point where you are well-known, and you come from a well-known and respected family here in Brighton, and it's to our credit that you guys are here. Tell us a little bit about your parents' involvement and what that finally turned into. Several honors that your mother especially was able to. Yeah.
Into PAL wrestling. I mean, that they were the heart of PAL wrestling, the police athletic wrestling program. My dad was a coach, and they ran the tournaments, and my mom was volunteering with the hospital, and my parents were into scouting. And my mom got a stone on the Memorial Parkway that runs from Bromley to where the trailhead is, and she'll have a school named after her. I guess it's not going to open this year because of the coronavirus, but it will open next year. So they were prominent citizens, which is by turns a really great thing. And sometimes growing up and beyond, it was kind of a bit of a hassle, but because I couldn't get away with anything ever.
Oh no, you were known as
Elaine and Gil's daughter.
Right. Yeah.
I couldn't go anywhere without being. As a teenager, that was sort of a problem.
I was just going to say that ended your rebellious streak as a teenager real quick, didn't it?
And then as a 20-something, and in my insecure days, even into my 30s, it was kind of hard because I felt like the town had expected great things. And so when I came back and I was just a housewife and then just a mom, I felt like I had let Brighton down in a way. Not that it's not okay to just be a housewife and a mom.
Sure.
But
But when you come from a prominent family, I think there's probably pressure that you've got to carry that torch.
You have
Right.
to be something really amazing. I had a community member, a couple of them, in well meaning ways maybe, that said, well, we thought you were going to write the great American novel. Or we thought, oh, I don't know, my mother had a better scholarship and she had decided to marry my dad. And one person once said, well, you kind of followed in your mother's footsteps. And I don't see that that's a bad thing.
Right.
But at the time, I don't know. It gets complicated.
So it sounds like the community went as a whole from trying to be overprotective of you as a child to kind of over expecting of you
Right, right.
as an adult, which I guess that's a tribute to you. I think when people look at the firebrand that you have, and you've not let any limitation slow you down. I think maybe it's not fair that we hold people up put them on pedestals that they don't want to be put on. But I think it's an amazing tribute. And you mentioned you kind of went through a period where you kind of withdrew. Was there anything specific that occurred where you went through a period of time where you weren't as creative and as active as you are now?
Well, my first husband had Lou Gehrig's disease.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And I was his caregiver for 10 years, and I needed to recover from a lot of things.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I just needed time.
Understand that. We are so glad that you did take the time to heal because, folks, you're a published author of 2 books. We're going to talk about your books today and get people in touch with your work and how they can support and contribute to you. The first one's called Bright Side of Darkness. Tell us about how that story came to be. That's kind of a cool genesis where it was like a story written and then put aside for a long time and then picked back up. Tell us that story.
Well, I started that story when I was going to Brighton High School, and it was, I think, my junior year. I had an assignment in a English class, and these characters just grabbed me. This group of kids, smart-mouthed, underprivileged kids at a baseball game. And so I wrote this story, which was just a short story for Kathy Gold's English class, and got an A, put it aside, but the characters never let me go. They just were in my mind, in the back of my mind. So then in the 90s, this was before computers, they had just come out. I needed to learn to use a word processor. So I took that story out because I needed a big chunk of text. And I started playing with it. And the writing was, teenagers don't really write well. But it was, but the characters still captivated me. They were still alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I added and deleted and cut and paste and moved things around, and the writing got better and the characters were just shining. And so I showed the story to my husband at the time, and it ended tragically. And he said, "You can't leave those kids like that. What happens to them?" I thought, well, what if? What if someone cared? What about second chances? And at that time, we were living really hard because he had Lou Gehrig's disease, and I was caring for him, and we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together.
Uh-huh.
And so we were the stable adults in a neighborhood where a lot of parents were living crazy, and the rest of them were working double shifts at the Scotch tape factory up in Greeley, or the meatpacking plant, trying to put food on the table. And so we did homework help and gave kids breakfast and did laundry and talked about relationships and just were there. And we were mentors.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned a lot about what kids need when the providers are not there.
And that's sort of what this book was about?
That's what that book is about on some level. It's about being positive forces of change in the world where we can. I mean, not everybody can be foster parents like the mentors are in that book, but there are kids all over the place on your block, in your school district, friends of your kids' friends who need someone. And
absolutely,
that's where you can reach out. They're everywhere. And so that's it's about a group of kids who navigate through the projects and eventually achieve stability, but it's about helping along the way. And it's about resiliency and redemption. And it's about a lot of things, but that's kind of the main theme of it.
That sounds, it's an amazing theme and premise and very important. I didn't tell you when we talked before, but I was a kid very similar to that. I grew up in a single mother household for years and years. We lived in government projects. We saw a lot of
Like
crime.
book.
Yeah. To rise above that takes a lot of fight, but it takes the surrounding of people that love you and can nurture you to see that you can do better than your circumstances. That
And
you're
it's
more
better
than that.
than
Yeah.
sitting around complaining about the world and how messed up it is. You can either complain or you can do something. And if you don't do something, then you don't have the right to complain.
That's right. Well, that book was well received. I think it's won several awards. Is that correct?
It's won a couple of awards from the Next Generation Indie Awards, which is an international contest, and it's won some awards from the Colorado Independent Publishing Association, which is nationally recognized.
That's amazing. Congratulations to that. Now, you've since written a second book that you told me is not a fiction story. It's more fun than that, maybe. And it's called Daddy Won't Let Mom Drive the Car.
Right. True Tales of Parenting in the Dark.
Tell us the story of how that one came to be.
Well, that book was written partly out of frustration because I saw one too many mothers almost lose their babies in the hospital. She was blind, and a nurse wrote down in her charts, I don't know how this is going to work. And then the social workers got involved, and it's a slippery slope.
Only because of her disability?
Because of her.
Wow. Okay.
And I had social workers. I had unfounded cases a couple of times that never went anywhere because neighbors got worried or silly little issues. I had somebody say that I had a mean looking dog and they were worried about the baby, or just trivial little things. And so there are pamphlets out there, educational kind of things about how we do baby care and, how we manage our children at parks and whatever. And, they don't seem to be helping. So I decided to write a book that was more lighthearted, mostly lighthearted vignettes about adventures from day to day with a child.
Okay.
And the title came because I was walking home with my kid when she was in second grade, so she must have been 7. And she piped up and she said, Mom, what's a streetwalker? And after I picked my jaw up off the ground, I said, well, it's someone who walks around looking for trouble. Where did you hear that? She said, a mean boy in my class called me that because I have to walk everywhere with you and my dog instead of driving in the car like other kids. And I thought, well, that's good. Neither one of them knew what that meant then. And I said, well, I think maybe I need to talk to your class. And she said, no, I'm not a tattletale. I don't. And I said, well, you walk with me and you know where everything is. But your friends get in their cars and they don't know where they go. They just don't pay attention. So I went to the class and talked to them about guide dogs. Well, then, of course, they thought Sarah was lucky because she got to go everywhere with her mom. And then the teacher said, so what's it like to have a blind mom? And my daughter said, oh, it's about like having a regular mom, except Daddy won't let her drive his car.
And there you go. There's the story behind the title. So when did that book come out?
That book came out last summer.
Last summer. Is it doing well?
It's doing well. I would like to see it get into the hands of more professionals, nurses, social workers, legislators, medical people who could make it's entertaining for parents, anyone who loves kids, that kind of people. But I'd like to see it make more of a professional difference.
Do you think there's still a sway that if they see a parent that's disabled in some way, that it's automatically sort of a mark against maybe the child being safe at home? That's ridiculous in my mind. But do you see that often?
I see that a lot. There are 6 or 7 states, thank God Colorado is one of them finally, as of last year, where a child cannot be taken from a parent simply on the grounds of disability. But in 43 states, that's not the case.
Wow. Do you see yourself becoming something of an activist on that ground? I mean, that story needs to be told. You're right. Your book needs to be out there. Yeah.
Definitely needs to be told. And I have committed to giving that book to anyone who is in that fight.
Wow. Folks, it's an important read. And you've got the books available for sale on your website through Kindle, right? Is that what you've also
Kindle, audio, and paperback at www.brightsideauthor.com.
Brightside Author. Okay.
They're also at Gerald's Watch Repair locally.
Oh, on Bridge Street. Is that on Bridge Street?
It's up by Dairy Queen.
Yeah, okay, exactly. Behind Bridge Street. Okay. Well, it's wonderful to hear. Incredible story. Joe, you're an amazing inspiration to me. I know that you got at least dipped your toe in local politics last year. Do you see any future for yourself as an elected leader in Brighton?
Probably not. I don't have the stomach for that.
Me neither. That was my first venture, and I hope my last, I'm telling you. So, I appreciate so much the chance to talk to you today. Let me ask you this, a couple last final questions. But, as a person with special needs, as you go through your day, what do you think, if you could say something to the general public about the special needs people that they know, the disabled people they know, what would you want us to know?
Everybody has dignity. Just speak to people the way you would want to be spoken to. Treat adults like adults, kids like human beings, and ask people if they want help. Say, take their yes as a yes and their no as a no. And if you wouldn't get offended by an adult without special needs saying no, then don't get offended by someone with a disability saying no. No, I got this. I'm fine. Okay, thank you.
Well, I got to tell you, your ability to push past, some of us have self-imposed limitations and mental blocks and things like that keep us from really achieving the things that we were maybe put on this earth to do. And to see someone who really pushes through a bona fide disability to accomplish great things. Joe, you're an incredible inspiration to not just the disabled community, but to all of us. And we are so proud that I'm calling you our very first, very Brighton person on our podcast. You were the first person I thought of when we decided to do this segment, and I'm delighted that you took the opportunity to talk with me today. Is there anything you would like to just say to our listeners as we say goodbye?
Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is being afraid and acting anyway.
Amen. Amen. Well, my dear, it's wonderful to talk to you. It's great to get to know you better. Brighton, if you want to spend learn so much about this person from her soul and her heart, pick up a book or listen to it on Audible. You can go to brightsideauthor.com. You can reach out to Joe there. I also saw you had a blog on there as well, Joe, so we can enjoy some of your other, smaller writing endeavors when you feel the spirit move you. And I just want to say thank you so much. Incredible inspiration. And I hope I can call you a friend in the future. You're just a wonderful woman to get to know. And Brighton, you have a gem. You have a diamond right here inside your city. And when you see Joe, give her a big hug. When you see, well, no, when we're not social distancing.
Right.
Right. I still reach out to shake people's hands, and we're like, oh, no, that's forbidden. So yeah, we have to be careful about that. At least for a month, maybe, or who knows how long we're going to do this. But so you're staying safe, Joe. You're staying at home, and you're doing all the stuff we're supposed to. And just wish you the very best. Let us know. Keep us informed if you have any new writings or anything new exciting in your life. We'll bring you right back on in a minute. So
okay.
All right. Thank you for participating in. Participating in. Participating in.